Hey! You're listening to Depth Perception with Randy LeBeau and Leo Marino. It's made possible by our patrons on Patreon.
Hi, I'm Randy,
And I'm Leo.
and we're here today to talk about the Mandela Effect. Leo, why don't you tell us a bit about where it comes from, what it is, and we'll take it from there.
All right, so what you need to know, if you don't already, is that a lot of people discovered that they shared a false memory. Some might object to me using the word false memory here, but basically people noticed that they thought that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1990s, and so many people kind of realized that they shared this memory that when they found out that in reality Nelson Mandela had died in 2013 after serving as first president of South Africa, it was like inconceivable to them that many people could share this false memory. And now, people have started tracking ever since Fiona Broome coined this term, some kind of like paranormal convention.
Dragon Con. It's like a fan con.
Oh, it was a fan con. I'm sorry. She's the paranormal something. We can find that.
Yeah, I mean, she's
a paranormal consultant according to a Wikipedia page about false memories.
She's like an alienist or something.
Yeah. She noticed that a lot of people shared other false memories too. So she coined the term Mandela Effect after realizing that a lot of people at Dragon Con had shared this false memory. This grew into a website, which she has maintained over the years, since I guess about 2010, always adding new examples. It's kind of developed away from her. It's people who are less skeptical than she is have decided to sort of try to explain this, come up with sort of a cosmology that explains the effect. Usually it involves something about branching timelines, and a very common version is CERN, to the point that some people refer to it as the CERN-Mandela Effect. You see this a lot on YouTube. And that's where we're at right now.
The CERN thing is like easily the most inexplicable thing about this. I mean, I don't even understand why people think that. I mean, it goes back to something we talk about all the time, which is that when you look at any theory like this, the Mandela Effect, you have to talk about what changes if what the quote unquote crazy person is saying is true. And I think, like, if absolutely nothing changes, or if the entire world changes, I think you kind of have to start writing things off about the theory. You have to think about it a little bit more critically. So for this thing to be true, the CERN aspect of this, the entire world has to have ended or been flung into another timeline, right?
Basically, like we can't count on all of the other like notions that we have in our heads about how things typically go.
Yeah. And I think the CERN aspect relies on them having created a black hole. Is that right?
Something like that. Some kind of, not necessarily a black hole, but like created some kind of division in reality where timelines diverged. It's like a folk version of like a parallel worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, where instead of the idea that like there's always branching parallel worlds, like instead like it's actually being directed by CERN, like just the very fact of particle collisions either had unintentionally created these things, and then was harnessed, or somehow physicists secretly somehow kept from the rest of science the fact that they had not only the means but the intention to split reality, and we're all kind of being led along Usually the interesting thing that I've seen is that the sort of the most out there versions of this theory that I've seen, and I haven't looked really far, but they tend not to go like to a sort of like a globalist sort of like anti-Semitic Alex Jones kind of direction. They tend to just stop at like, oh, CERN is taunting you.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say George Soros doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Who somehow became the guy for everything in 2020.
Because of Glenn Beck.
Is it because of Glenn Beck?
That's like Glenn Beck's legacy. Yeah.
Oh my god,
as far as I know.
my favorite radio host, Glenn Beck.
Yeah.
So the thing about these things is that for the Mandela Effect to be true, something like at an unimaginable scale has to have happened. I mean, something we can barely conceive of, outside of science fiction.
Right.
But the things that changed are absolutely like nearly completely immaterial,
Right. With the exception of Nelson Mandela himself dying in a different year.
The
and
one
like,
thing.
again,
The one thing.
Right. And the fact also, for some reason, even if we just accept that it's not just because like U.S. I've talked to friends who believe this and think they learned it in school. Even if we accept that like it's not just actually a result of like the U.S. education system having a lot of issues and like, I don't know, maybe people not like having contemporary, like, recent history cemented in their minds. I mean, just what I'm getting at is you could go ask anybody from South Africa and they would be like, what the fuck? Like, imagine if
it's
people
common
in the UK,
knowledge.
Imagine if people in the UK named a theory after a U.S. president who they thought died in prison, or died before he was ever in office. And then like, we're talking about it on the internet and acting like it was real. Like it's absurd. Of course, and it's not like you tend to find people who are really into this, who are like, oh yeah, like it's such a strange thing that the world itself, you have to have so many other branching, like residual, like consequences of this effect. There have to be so much different, but it's never focused. There's never a focus on that. There's never an exploration of that. There's never even an acceptance of or grappling with the fact of like, oh, like I'm probably very ignorant of like the impact that Nelson Mandela has had on South Africa. South Africa remains an idea on the same level as like the Berenstain Bears books that everyone, says the name was changed. And
well,
it's everything is leveled.
That's one thing about this is, if they had picked any other name besides Nelson Mandela to attach to this thing, which I think is really clever marketing. I mean, I don't know if Ms. Broom is selling books or anything, but I mean, she definitely did pick the most substantial one.
Yeah, definitely.
To name the phenomenon after.
She definitely picked, but it's also the most like hard to reconcile. Well,
yeah, because it's just common knowledge. I mean, I wouldn't call Curious George here, or I didn't even think like the Lindbergh baby is common knowledge.
Right.
I think it's like esoteric knowledge. But Nelson Mandela is, he was an important man, and I think it's really easy for people, because there is a fundamental mistrust of science that I think is probably more prevalent in the world than the acceptance of science. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think...
Yeah, I do. I think today that's true. Maybe it's always been true, but today it's definitely obvious and like
I think you're right,
accepted.
I think it probably has always been true. And the fact that people are more willing to doubt reality before they doubt themselves.
Right. The fact that people can't conceive of like, I have false memories.
Yeah.
Like, all that it takes for people to overcome grappling with that is hearing that somebody else has the same false memory as them.
Well, yeah, as soon as that common ground exists, then
it's real.
Yeah. In the magical way, it becomes real. But you and I have talked about this. I remember things that I can just shy of guarantee did not happen. But I remember the way that they make me feel now. I remember the way that I felt about them when they did happen. So it becomes this kind of like dream world in your own mind, where you're trying to sort through your memories.
Oh yeah, I have memories that I know are impossible. I also have memories that I think are possible but seem very unlikely. But I've had them I at least remember having had those memories for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the one I always use is the cult in Orwell, which I'm sure what I saw was just like a party or something, and not, a spiritualist revival or whatever, or the shadow cat in the middle of the woods. I'm sure I didn't see that, but I remember the feeling of being entirely too high driving down the road and seeing something in the woods. But there's no way that it happened.
I didn't remember the shadow cat story. That's cool.
I mean, it's a cool story. I don't think it, again, I think just like so many of these examples, Looney Tunes or whatever, I don't think it means anything. I don't know why we're so ready to attach weight to things.
Right. The idea is that there's a couple of them that, well, it's like, oh, we have a big one. We have Nelson Mandela. I think that setting up the effect around, like you said, a prominent example is sort of the biggest obstacle in a way to really getting to the bottom of what it is, because it tends to attract people who are not willing to really think down the road of are not willing to, or have a vested interest in not thinking down the sort of the path of well, what would it mean for the world, if this was true? I mean, if you look at those YouTube videos of people that are endorsing it and saying it's real and trying to get other people to believe, they never ever, almost never go into it with any skepticism. It tends to be really, really teleological. I know exactly where I want, what conclusion I want to find, and I'm just gonna climb my way there. And that's why these tiny ones become important, because the effect is I think it catches your attention because it's named after such a one that would have such large consequences, but then you don't interrogate those consequences, and then you pile up a bunch of other examples of the same that have the sort of the same shape, that are really just common shared false memories, which aren't a new thing. And then you say, well, this happened more than once, and people who tend to have one tend to have some of these other false memories. Therefore, this is a thing. And then you get to claim that, then you get to use that sort of that fact of I've listed a bunch of shared false memories to sort of validate the more, I think, consequential ones.
Yeah, and some of these things, I think you made a really great point when you said that in our text thread, you said that people quote each other in different ways. People interpret things differently. People convey the same thing in different ways. The Forrest Gump thing.
Yeah, that's the example we were talking about.
Life was like a box of chocolates. It just always goes back to what does it matter?
Yeah, this one is, I think, worth talking about, because it's, in a way, it's one of the most sort of low-hanging ones. And again, this is because people quote each other in different ways. The line is, Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. Well, when he heard his mom say it, he didn't hear her say, Forrest, life was like a box of chocolates. She obviously would have said life is like a box of chocolates. What he was conveying in that quote was what she said to him, and the past tense, the tense of the verb leaked into the quote, basically. It's that simple. And people are going to grab onto that because it's another example, because then they can say they're looking for this to be a Mandela effect. They're not looking for an explanation if there's one available. So they completely go to the end, which is, okay, my explanation is it's a circular one. This is the Mandela effect. It's not, okay, well, no one's interested in disassembling the mechanics. So taking apart the Mandela effect and looking at what it's made of, people are interested in saying it's CERN, but that's because the idea of quantum mechanics and branching realities, this very misused idea of dimensions, all of these ideas have nothing to do with things that these people that are coming up with these ideas, they're not things that people who are saying this understand. Nobody who understands physics is saying this is real. It's only people for whom physics is basically magic.
Yeah, and I hate it when people say that, you know, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Because, like, when you look at science and the scientific method, there is logic to it. You know, there's a reason for everything. You know, I mean, obviously there's randomness in the world, but there is like a method. There is a scientific method to establish truth, or to search for truth. And we shared that anti-vax video between us, which doesn't have anything itself to do with the Mandela Effect, but it goes into this distrust of science, you know, and obviously, like, it comes from, you know, a fear of things you don't understand, you know, or like the fluoride thing. I don't know if you remember that from when we were kids. I mean, maybe it was legit and I just don't remember that part, but the idea that, like, we were being poisoned with fluoride, which we had to take at school all the time.
Yeah, I didn't hear that until I was older.
Yeah, I didn't know about it.
Everyone took fluoride. It was completely
Everybody.
normal.
Yeah.
I mean, I
feel
took
like
it
was
at home,
mandatory.
but yeah, if you didn't take it at home, you had to take it at school. Pretty
Yeah.
much everyone just did it at school because it was easier.
I don't remember why. I don't know if it was like about us not brushing our teeth or something, but
Yeah, it was basically so that the school could ensure that people all had like a slight extra level of protection for their teeth, I guess, you know.
I guess.
don't know.
But you know, it is like kind of childish in a way, the thing that people do, where it's just constant projection, you know. It can't be my memory. It has to be the state of the world that has changed.
I think that the constant projection thing is people are just they mistrust science. I mean, they have a right to mistrust science just on aesthetic grounds. Why? Well, because science is always touted as like the authority that needs no explaining. So I don't blame people who are skeptical of science and who don't understand it if at certain times in their life they or people they know have been hurt by like things that are said to be aligned with science. But what that ends up creating is not actually understanding what science is or what it can be, and only seeing like the effects of what gets called science and gets wielded against people as science. Like, you know, example from the past would be like scientific racism. From the past, I say, as if it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. That shit's still alive.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you know, eugenics. I mean, or the way that like specific technology, you know, scientifically derived technology, you know, has hurt people.
Yeah.
And science itself, like you said, has been used as a weapon.
Yeah, right. Science gets weaponized all the time. And
it's true that we, you know, I think it's safe to say that both of us are pretty progressive. We're both progressives, and like one of the things that I think people that we both believe in, like in the political sphere, you know, they say it's not up to us. We have to trust science. You know, AOC says it a lot. Responsible people like AOC say it, and you know, I think it's natural for people, you know, anytime they hear like we have to believe them. You know, it's not up to us. We have to believe them. You know, I think the natural reaction is to say like no, or maybe it's an American thing.
Yeah.
And you know, American people aren't just from America. There's American ass people with the American attitude all over the world. But you know, I think they connect that thing, the thing that, you know, we have to listen to science. I think they connect that to, you know, all the wars that we fought against fascism and totalitarianism across the world. I don't know why. I don't know why it's easy to connect it to that. I mean,
wait, say what you mean.
Say what I mean about what?
Connected in what way? Connected to fascism being bad, or? Yeah,
like being told, you know, you have to listen to this. There's not a choice but to listen to this. I think people will like go out of their way to ignore what is in their best interest. You know, just to preserve like some kind of independence of thought.
Yeah.
When in reality, like I don't think having an open mind is necessarily a good thing, because things, tend to fall out of an open cavity. But like, it's not thinking for yourself to just say, I'm going to ignore input. My dad presently denies that coronavirus is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he heard the line that it's a Democratic hoax, that was all he needed to hear. The person with the most authority said it, so it has to be true. But at the same time, like, you're listening to the person with the most authority, and claiming yourself to be like thinking independently.
Right.
I just don't
Right, because
understand
the aesthetics of somebody like who is against the establishment are being wielded by somebody who is the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to all the coastal elites.
Yeah, right.
Which one of them is in charge right now? But
yeah.
Once again, like, I don't know how valuable, like, thinking for yourself is if it's to your own detriment. Like, how valuable can it be?
Meaning what? That we should have certain social expectations in like in a well-functioning society. There should be certain social expectations that limit people's willingness to, I don't know, to challenge accepted thought. Is that what you're saying?
Well, is it accepted thought though? If half the country doesn't accept it, is it accepted?
That's a good point. Like, what is accepted? Right. What is accepted thought? But like, why do I call it accepted thought? Well, because the media, for example, puts a lot of pressure on on people to accept this is like normal. Like, I mean that in exactly the way I said it. Like, there's pressure on me to accept that the world is how I read about it being. Because if I don't accept that, one, it's a lot scarier. And two, the narratives that I'm given that tell me other things about the world are called into question. They become a lot less stable. And I think this is a thing that is also experienced by people who, for example, who believe in a lot of conspiracy theories, but it's experienced in a slightly different way, maybe with, with different social circumstances and different people, I think, ready to tell them that they can help them and tell them what's really true. When I feel like an amount of skepticism, when I feel like the narratives that I'm being given are wrong, I look to people who have done research about, that tends to be critical of mass media, tends to be critical of the ruling class. So of course I'm going to the left. I'm reading about things that are to the left of what the media is telling me. But other people are inevitably going to be finding other sources of information that are going to also drive them away from sort of like what is perceived by me still as the sort of like the master narrative of the media. I don't know yes. Go ahead.
That's what it all comes down to, right? Is that like people believe their perception more than they believe the collective perception. I think 10 times out of 10 times, you're going to find that like the collective perception outweighs individual perception, just in terms of what is objective. And maybe that sounds obvious, but the collective will tell you that the things that the Mandela Effect is about are not real. Collectively, I think the world knows that it's the Berenstain Bears, right?
Yeah, I have a personal experience when I was young, maybe 10. I remembered it was Berenstain too, and I went and pulled out the book because I would periodically go pull out old books from when I was a kid. They were around. And I saw it was Berenstain, and I had a moment of confusion, but I accepted it. And the next time I brought it up with my mom, it was confirmed it was Berenstain. She never had a problem with it.
Yeah. it's, you know, I said earlier that like Nelson Mandela is the most like significant thing, and that it's like fortuitous that, or completely intentional that that Broom chose to name the effect after Nelson Mandela. But like, even then, like, how important is Nelson Mandela to, you know, to the people that would think that this theory is legit? You know, how important is Nelson Mandela to them? I mean, I like to think that I'm like pretty aware of the world, and Nelson Mandela doesn't like really mean a lot to me. I mean, it's good that he helped to like usher out apartheid and everything.
Did I ever think he died in prison? No. Did I know he was president? Yeah.
I mean,
did I know that why
you
he
know,
was imprisoned? Yeah, but like it's not like it's not like he's some kind of American hero.
well, and that's another thing, is that like I did think he died in prison until I learned that he didn't. Like, it wasn't me being like insulted by contrary information. I just learned information to the contrary.
Right. It happens all the time. When I learn a word, I think that I've learned to, even if my initial reaction is some kind of weird shock or even horror, when I learn that I have a fact wrong that I really thought I knew, or when I learn I've been saying a word wrong or spelling a word wrong for a long time, I try to sit and remember that it's a good thing that I'm feeling this feeling, and try to get some amount of I don't know, positive emotion from that fact, because it reminds you that like the world isn't fully predictable.
And
I mixed up the words imminent and imminent earlier, like with an A and with an I, and I wrote imminent with an A, and I was like, that doesn't look quite right, but I was not able to say why, and I had to look it up, and I was like, right, okay, imminent has 2 I's in it, and these words have different meanings.
I was not aware of that. Like, that's the thing, is like, if you take it as an insult when you are contradicted, you know, I understand believing this, but I don't. What I don't understand is being insulted when you learn contradictory information.
I gotta pull up a Facebook post right now if I can that I saw earlier.
Okay.
Because somebody said something like that is very relevant to this exact thing, but that I found completely ludicrous.
Okay.
You know, I'm not going to be able to find it, but I can summarize what they said.
Yeah, do it.
It was a page on Facebook that I would say kind of used to be maybe a little bit more politically left, but lately I've seen this in a lot of Facebook pages. I don't know what's going on. A lot of pages that are sort of left have started to be inundated with more like sort of edgy centrists, just sort of edgy people who are kind of like, well, why not just adopt the normative perspective? You know, or they're arguing basically like Democrat, you know, moderate Democrat arguments, or even conservatives sometimes. In this case,
how left is left is.
When I say left, I mean, okay, we're gonna. It's.
I just mean that it's another conversation entirely. You know, like how left is the left?
Right. It's basically, it means that officially everybody in the group is a leftist, and if they're not, they're there to quietly be converted to being a leftist. And I don't like that environment, but it's one that exists, and I think is largely a product of the structure of Facebook itself and the weird kind of quiet violence that the literal groups that Facebook makes you go into to have private conversations ends up like working on your mind. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that there's a real thing to be talked about there with the way that like the imaginary borders of what is a group, what is membership, what's in and out have become real through the internet. That has real consequences, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's another episode entirely that
absolutely
I think we have to do at some point.
I agree with that, actually, strongly. So going back to what I was saying, though, this person was saying, okay, so all of you leftists who say that, like, Mark, you know, average people who, like, disaffected people can't read theory because they can't understand it, like, explain how people can get so invested in, like, these popular conspiracy theories, which include, like, a lot of detail. And I, like, commented, and because to me, that's ridiculous. If you watch these videos, I have a strong perception that the normative way of approaching these is absolutely grounded in magical thinking, aesthetics first, you know, goal first. I think the only thing that Marxist theory has in common with something like the Mandela Effect is that people have an end goal in mind and they're trying to get there. But the scale on which that happens is totally different. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the quote that I quote more than any other statement, which is that conspiracy theory is the folklore of modern white America. You know,
100%.
I think you're right that like it is grounded in magical thinking. You know, because what what is folklore except, you know, an ostensibly false story that is given weight because it's shared among the people of a culture
Yeah.
and it's used to teach a lesson, right?
Yeah.
That is like what a folktale is and what folklore is all about. You know,
Yeah.
it's what
Sometimes it's used to teach a lesson. Sometimes it's used to just inscribe an important image in people's minds.
yeah, it's like an expression of instinct, right?
Yeah. That's
It
basically what Jungian archetypes are too. It's like they're expressions, or they are some form of like accumulated instinct that then manifests in various images which are distinct themselves from the underlying thing.
yeah.
You could
And
do that with this too. Yeah, I mean, not to cut you off too much. Go ahead.
well, please do because I almost had nothing to say about it. But I guess I do now. But you know, like I'm sympathetic to like conspiracy thinking because I hate to out myself like this, but I did used to listen to Alex Jones. I did used to think he was like the smart woke guy, you know. So I'm halfway sympathetic to like conspiracy minded thinking, but there comes a point where you have to like stop and take it in and like look at what you're doing when you know when you spread these theories. And I think to treat it too much like good old folklore is bad, and it's something that I definitely don't want to do. So I don't want to encourage like people just to not believe anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I mean,
I
yeah,
don't believe, you know, I don't believe that the story of Little Red Riding Hood happened, but like I learned something from it, just in
right.
the way that like I don't believe the Mandela Effect is happening, but there's something to take from it. And
I have
you know, instead of like trying to dissuade people from believing in it, what I want to do is like just encourage people to learn the lesson of it without taking it too seriously.
Yeah, because then there's a sense, of course, in which the Mandela effect 100% is real. We can talk about if the name is silly, or you know, maybe if the name influences sort of and attracts certain types of people, and ends up accumulating certain other examples. But I mean, it's you know, false memories, the way that they manifest are real. If you look through the list, anybody who looks through that list of Mandela effect examples is going to find, I think almost anybody is going to find some that they've
Yeah,
had.
I think it's completely inevitable. You know, there's just looking through it now, like I'm seeing things that I thought were true
Right.
that are not true.
Why shouldn't false memories be shared if if factually accurate memories are shared by people?
Yeah, and this
Right.
I
Just
mean this comes up in like Sheldrake, you know, talking about his resonance.
another episode.
Yeah, but I think it's valuable to talk about now. That
Absolutely.
you know, if Rupert Sheldrake's idea is right at all, then it only makes sense that like false memories are shared in the same way that real memories are shared. You know, we attach a lot of like cultural weight to memory. You know, you have things like never forget 9/11, right? That is like
Right.
imprinted in the cultural identity of America at this
Right.
point.
Part of the memory is like that imperative, like never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's inevitable that it will be forgotten at some point. Just like I think like all the information that you can take from the Mandela effect is, you know, it'll be forgotten and relearned and things like that. But there's no way that you can like there. It's like so irresponsible for me to choose to believe that it's real instead of believing that your memory is not as sound as you thought it was.
I think that what we have here is a case of sort of different. I don't know. You could just to be like a little bit metaphorical. You could talk about like sort of like different gods in our society, like sort of the god of the individual, like just like the liberal god of like the individual thinking rational subject is part of this story, and a complete acceptance of that to the point of like not being able to conceive of questioning it is part of this, because I mean, like, and as I've heard it said many times, what I'm trying to say is that a consequence of Descartes' philosophy, I'm not making this up, I definitely heard it on Weird Studies once, is the solipsist, like the extreme individual who denies that the world around him. And again, what does it matter if you think this way? Well, I think this is a good example of where it matters. If you think of yourself as a solipsist, or even if you think of yourself as the only person that you can verify existing, if you assume that and you latch onto the idea that, okay, like I've rationally come to this conclusion because I can't prove that anything else exists, you're of course always sweeping something under the rug. It might be hard to articulate in our time what that is, because certain other forces that might have been stronger at other times are sort of overshadowed by that god of rationalism and of individuality. But when you have a certain part of that god of rationalism inside of you that says, like, okay, like, if my memory is wrong, then the world changed. And then you also take comfort in the fact that other people had the same experience. You're basically coming right up to the line of noticing the contradiction, but just not quite getting there. Right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you're a solipsist, but on the other hand, you're taking evidence from other people's experience as evidence of the outside reality that is independent of you.
Well, yeah, and I think that, like, surviving contradiction is, I think that's the way that, like, humanity has developed, right? Determining which contradiction you accept and which you don't.
Right.
There's like that binary way of life that, interjects in all elements of living.
Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to ask you about to see if you've noticed this, because I had not thought about it until during our conversation. Okay, so another thing that I notice is that there is a sort of a ritual element a lot of the time of discussing conspiracy theories. I think it goes right along with like ghost stories, stories of the paranormal. I tend to find, at least when I want to discuss things like paranormal or conspiracy theories, is that there's a sort of a shift in the energy with a person when I do it, especially coworkers at work. Like if we kind of switch into a certain register, a certain mode, you feel a little bit outside of yourself. You feel like there's a certain connection that happens when you share these stories of the unexplainable, a certain maybe inherent threat to the self, because you're talking about things that don't rationally make sense, or that at least would threaten your position in others' eyes as a smart, rational person.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. I mean, it's like the kind of danger that you feel when you're, alone at night.
Yeah.
Right? It's reverting back to instinct. Because ostensibly if you're talking about these things, it's because you believe them on some level. I mean, you don't have to believe that they're literally real to believe them, right?
Right.
I mean, I think Ghost Stories was a great example because it's the same thing as, it's the same thing to me. Like, talking about a ghost story is like exactly the same as thinking about, seeing it like a snake in the grass or something. It's like exactly the same thing to me, right? It like evokes the same feeling of primal, like, animal instinct.
Yeah.
Because it's number one, it's something that you're afraid of, and like my good friend H.P. Lovecraft once said, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. And talking about the paranormal and talking about conspiracy theories is like, to even say anything about them, you're admitting that there's something you don't know. And that is like the thing that triggers the fear.
Yeah. And there's a social function to experiencing fear collectively. Like that, I think, can itself, even if you don't elaborate further, be like an important thing for people. Like it can be something that helps people process their emotions. It helps people feel like, I shouldn't be like excluding myself from this. It helps you feel like, because, you know, a lot of people on the left also, you know, a lot of the talk that happens is specifically and explicitly about things in the world that, you know, you feel should be improved and made more fair, more democratic. And that involves talking about forces that instill fear for you or for people that you care about. So
yeah, I mean, everything.
I don't want to ridicule people for having the impulse to listen to something about, like, to be attracted to something like the Mandela Effect or conspiracy theories in general. And I like, there's a lot of people in my family who I love who are attracted to certain conspiracy theories, and I'm not trying to. But the fact is, I don't have the vocabulary to really talk about it with them respectfully either.
Yeah, so I mean, the last thing that I ever want to do when I'm unless it's like something really outrageous. I mean, I can't respect somebody that's telling me that Obama is a lizard. I just can't do it.
No, yeah.
But like the Mandela Effect, like you can kind of understand it, because definitely I've grappled with, you know, recognizing that I don't remember things, you know, and it's something that I've come to terms with, and that like doesn't frighten me anymore, in the way that it did. I mean, it's not something I was like, it never gave me goosebumps or anything, but like it is scary to realize that like there are like definitely years that have happened in my life that I don't have solid memories of, you know, for one reason or another. Yeah. So I you know, I can respect like the kind of fear that like somebody is obviously contending with when they think about the Mandela Effect being real and they talk about it. But I don't know. There is like a solution to all fear, right? And just believing that the scary thing is real is not good enough all the time.
Yeah. Having compassion for people who, like, I don't know, maybe believe that elites are literal lizards is one thing, but like having respect for them is another. And yeah, also, I mean, like having patience for them is another. I can't, you know,
not to out myself as an asshole for like the 10th time on this podcast, but I mean, I don't think I have those things for people that believe that specifically, or, you know, things like that. Things that
I definitely have it for people in the abstract, but I don't necessarily have it for them when I'm talking to them face to face.
Well, I mean, yeah, insofar as they are a human being, like I have compassion for them, but like I don't rue the position that they're in. You know, I'm not like, my heart doesn't break for them.
Yeah.
But
right.
The last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I want to do is shame people for believing, you know, for believing something scary. I mean, the lizard people thing is not scary because there aren't lizard people. And if there are, why is that scary?
Right.
I mean, if they are and they exist, what's scary about it? I don't know. It's definitely less scary than the Mandela Effect being real. But again, I don't want to like shame people if they're listening to this and they believe that the Mandela Effect is something that's happening. If you know,
but it's also like, what do you mean? Like the Mandela Effect is something that's happening. There's people who are just like, now we have a name for a collection of things, of false memories that are shared.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're just categorizing information, that's one thing. But I mean, if you like,
yeah,
I can't like be upset with people who think that like CERN destroyed the world, because it's just understanding. It's like, you don't get mad when a kid doesn't know something, and like that's not to disparage people or call them children who believe in this, because that's not what I think. But I mean, you can't be mad at people for like a genuine misunderstanding, or maybe the man himself misunderstands reality.
It's
Maybe
definitely
I misunderstand, but
it's definitely a situation where the people who I think are really of concern are the people who are like propagating these theories. Not even the people who are propagating these theories because they really believe them. Because there's plenty. I mean, we've watched many videos. But the people who like propagate these theories because they're trying to make money. I can give you an example.
There's hucksters that do everything.
That book, we were watching Missing 411 and the Hunted, and I shared with you specifically that part about the Bigfoot noises at the Sierra camp, because the first time I watched that,
we should put some of these things in the description for sure. I think that would be good for us to do.
Yeah, I'll go through and like list the things we talked about. That was like the first time I heard it, I was chilled by it. It sounded like there was way more going on in the vocalizations than I thought there was. Second time I listened to it, it is scary. I mean, it still has an effect on me. Second time I listened to it was with you. And it wasn't as dramatic the second time I listened to it. Third time, I showed it to Lydia, and I was listening to it with her, and honestly, it just sounded goofy. And it was like...
What did she think about it?
She thought... Like,
I know what you thought, I know what I thought.
Yeah. She thought it was interesting, but at least the video that I pulled up, because there were several online, it sounded goofy. Here's the fact, though. The facts. After Lydia wasn't really impressed, I pulled up the guy's website. He has a book advertised on the top of the page called let me just pull it up. It's worth pulling up.
Well, you're pulling that up. I want to like pitch something.
Okay.
Like, the thing about having to refute things like this is that you have to make the same argument that people use to refute science, when you have to refute like the guy selling the Bigfoot book, it's because like, well, of course he's like seeing and experiencing these things. It's because he's going to make money by virtue of the fact that he did experience these things, right? I mean, I could go out with the intention, like Randonaut or something. I could go on a Randonaut adventure. But shout out to that app. It's a good app. I think people should use it if they're listening to this. But like, I could like focus and really like think that I want to go out to find something, and I'll experience it like one way or another.
Right.
The law of attraction like works.
Right.
and
that's the same principle that's at work when you're looking through examples of things in your life that, if you want to find a Mandela effect, you're going to find out that Forrest Gump said was instead of is, and you're going to just say that's a Mandela effect. You're going to have that
for sure.
experience.
And like maybe it's another thing about the Mandela effect, like in particular, I think it's really unique among conspiracy theories, the Mandela effect. Because like maybe you didn't even misremember it until just now, like until the moment that you're confronted with the information. Maybe you didn't misremember it. That I think is like one of the most interesting things about it is like all this stuff that you find in there. Like, I think like the dangerous thing about having to refute things like this and the way that you have to refute them, which is by saying that like, if people are going to make money off of it, of course, like they're going to find what they're looking for. But like, that's the same thing with science, like a cancer researcher ostensibly is paid to find a solution to cancer, right?
Right. So they have an incentive to present a solution.
Exactly. And and like, if that's the way that we refute the Mandela effect, then like, doesn't that make us kind of irresponsible?
Yeah. I mean, you sound like a Marxist materialist, like, and I think, and
I would love to know what you mean by that, because I have no idea what you mean by that.
So if there was a system in which people worked however they could, ostensibly we could get to a point someday where scientists are not paid based on the studies they choose, but based like they gravitate towards things based on like what's needed.
Oh yeah, well I mean it's the dream of like well, it's kind of a fucked up dream, I guess. Like if like careers in science were just all paid the same, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like kind of the dream, but it's also like a total nightmare because quantifying the value of work like that is bad. You know, but I do understand what you mean.
Right. Well, what you would need is a break from the quantification of work at all before you could get there in a really genuine way that wouldn't
Yeah.
become. You know.
But I do definitely understand what you mean. But
Yeah.
again, I think it's like irresponsible to argue in this way, and I will never claim to be a responsible person in the way that I speak, but there has to be some way, and maybe I hope somebody that listens to this is more thoughtful than I am, and can present me with a way to argue this type of thing, but just using the same argument that people could use to refute the things that I believe in. Such as evidence and science, it's not a good thing to do. It's not like a good way to argue something. Especially because some of this stuff is just, it's so unprovable that you can't disprove it.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of just have to accept that the thing exists. Like if the theory exists, then the thing that the theory is about exists. I mean, just in that magical way. It's like an Earthsea, right? Speaking something's true name is what gives it power. Or in like a lot of like Western magic ideas. Yeah. But the fact that people believe in it kind of makes it real, right? Or what's the it's like Tinkerbell, Right. Tinkerbell feeds on. She's like a parasite that feeds on belief. Yeah, which is what all things are, because at the end of the day, like, reality is not objective. If people experience reality differently, then there is no objective reality, right? Or we can't access the objective reality. Right. I mean, is there a sense in which there's people and things in the world for which I literally don't exist? Like, are there things that literally my existence like doesn't exist to them? Yeah. Right? That's the question. If that's true, like, what is my existence? If it's not outside, if there's not a field in which all things exist equally, all ideas, all things, everything are all there, well, then how do I know that any collection, like any subgroup of things that I think exist, actually exist? And how do I know there aren't things that I literally can't imagine that if I were to see them might seem mundane? It's not just enough to say, like, how do I know there's things that are crazy unknowns that are horrifying, like, to think about, or impossible, kind of Lovecraftian, sort of unknowable, unseeable, uncomprehendable, or if I were to comprehend them, they would make me insane, or something like that. How do I know there aren't things that are completely mundane that if I saw them, maybe wouldn't even register as strange, that literally to me don't exist right now? Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, if you experience something, right, it's as real as it needs to be. Like, it doesn't matter. Nothing else about it matters except that you did experience it. Yeah. That's like the problem with the tree falling in the woods and nobody's around to hear it. Like it did happen, just something that we don't have a way to communicate with experienced it. Well, that's maybe that was stupid, but I think I heard this on Weird Studies, actually, that Berkeley, like the philosopher Berkeley, was like, God is the presence that experiences those things. Like, needed there to be an experiencer so that none of the world would be lost in, like, yeah, but I mean, like, but like, it's experienced by the tree, or like, it's experienced by the tree that falls, or it's experienced by like the bug that got squashed by the tree, Right. Or the bird that was in the knot of the tree when it fell. Think I might be, when I kind of led us down this thread, I feel like I might have been being kind of like fake deep, like maybe a little bit disingenuous on some level. I think we're both going to find that is like the heart of this podcast is fake. Oh, for sure. Yeah, fake deep. I mean, but on the other hand, it's maybe it's just, I never, like, I've had this idea before, but I've never really let myself think it out, or like, really, I don't think right now that I agree with the idea that there's things that I literally can't, that literally are not real to me, but that are somehow in another way real. Like, I think I'm just moving the field
of what I'm calling reality. Do you know what I mean? Like I think if I say like, oh, it's not real to me, but someday it will be, unless I'm I just think that I'm always going to have to put the contradiction somewhere.
Mhm.
And if there is a way for there not to be a contradiction, then my mind goes, well, what would that look like? And then it's like, well, maybe there's a field outside of everything in which all things are, again,
I mean,
real equally. But like, why? But like maybe there's always going to be like a,
like when you hear a song, right?
yeah,
And it doesn't happen often. This thing I'm about to say, it doesn't happen often, but like when it does, it is such like a visceral experience. When you sometimes every now and then you're going to hear a song, and it's going to speak to you in a way that it could only have been like inspired by you, like across space and time. You inspired the song, and it's like
yes,
about and for you, right?
I can think
mean,
very specifically of the last time that happened to me.
I can too. I'd be
Yeah.
interested in hearing about it. I think in its like own way, it would be like a valuable appendix for the podcast. But like you can see this thing happen on video. Like there's a video of it of John Lennon being confronted with somebody who had this experience. And it's that thing of like it feels so real that it has to in some way be real. Like I don't know if I'm making sense or if I even said what I was thinking. But
No, you're
go ahead.
maybe I missed something, but I think that like, yeah, in some way, like that is a thing that didn't exist or doesn't exist except for at that particular moment, in the sense that there's moments that are truly like sort of singularities, like you feel like you're inhabiting a moment that is in some way completely independent from the normal flow of your experience. I definitely have had that with these sort of song moments, like we're talking about.
I had
And
this
in some way that isn't literally real to me. Even maybe while it's happening, it's not real. Like it's a weird thing, or even as soon as it's passed, it's no longer real. I can't be sure that it really happened.
I want to tell you, this is something that I didn't tell you, and that I probably wouldn't have told you if I didn't just stumble through what I just said. But I had this experience with Twin Peaks the other day. Which I don't know if you've seen Twin Peaks.
I haven't watched Twin Peaks in a few years. I basically watched a season and a few episodes.
I'm watching it for the first time now.
Okay.
And I hope I didn't tell you this already, because that would be a bummer.
No, you haven't.
But I was watching it, and I was like 3 or 4 episodes into the series, and I saw this shot that like defined exactly, like in my mind, like totally defined exactly the vibe of what Twin Peaks is about. The like total David Lynchian like feeling of that show was defined in this shot. And I was like, for that instant, like when that shot like connected with me, I something about me like perceived the entire flow of time that I had been watching that show totally differently, because turns out I wasn't 3 or 4 episodes into the series. I was about 18 minutes into the pilot. But like there was something about that shot, like looking back on it in hindsight, before I had found out where I actually was in the show.
Wait, you were watching the episodes out of order, you mean?
No. It was like this weird like feeling that I got from that shot. Like the exact vibe of Twin Peaks like happened in my real life when I saw that shot. And like I experienced like such a weird feeling of like loss of time. Because like I said, I thought I was like hours and hours and hours into the show, like multiple episodes into the show, and I was just barely into the pilot when I saw it.
Oh, you had
what
a
I mean?
feeling of encapsulation
like
during that shot.
I was like so surrounded by the feeling, that shot evoked in me, that like the time before and after it was dilated, And I think the same thing happens with those like musical moments, or when you see like a painting that speaks to you, like one that got to me was it was a Rodin sculpture, Bellomiere or something like that. I saw that on the art trip to New York City that we went on in like the 11th grade or whatever. You know, just these things that speak to you, and like it can be anything. It doesn't have to be like music or film or sculpture. You know, it can be like things like the Mandela Effect that kind of separate you off into your own perception of the world. You know, I sincerely hope what I'm saying makes like perfect sense. I have the feeling it doesn't, but
I think I haven't had that experience that you've explained, at least not.
You know what's another one that you might
soberly?
Well, the good news is I except for like the odd half bottle of wine, I am sober almost all the time. Like another one that gets me is the train shot in Spirited Away, which I don't want to talk about because no spoilers, but I think we might be talking about Spirited Away pretty soon. But the train shot in Spirited Away like takes me out of real time and puts me in like the time that happens, you know, because it kind of like compresses like the time of that movie in its own way, like that kind of pillow shot that happens. Like it's like this. I experience it through art because like art is the thing that I like choose to experience all the time. Like it's not, you know, educating myself in more worldly matters in the way that like the Mandela Effect is a worldly matter. But like I understand like the feeling that people get when they like experience it for the first time and can't get away from it, you know?
Yeah.
Good.
I have had this experience in various forms of art. Like I said, not soberly usually. I've had sort of similar experiences with art installations where I just am totally enraptured. I'm just totally encapsulated, and I have to like sit there. It's rare, but it happens. I definitely have moments where my awareness of my surroundings is scrambled, but again, really only under the influence, I think, of cannabis. And then
yeah, I mean, cannabis is like a spiritual advisor, right?
Yeah.
You know, shout out to weed. But I do, you know, it is something that like, it's like the thing that weed was made for, I guess. Like when the universe created the compounds in THC, like it was made for this feeling.
Yeah.
And like there is like a kind of a high that comes with you know, feeling enlightened by something like the Mandela Effect. And I think the Mandela Effect is like very uniquely poised among conspiracy theories. It's like it's one that's survived for a decade, which doesn't happen a lot. Like it really doesn't happen a lot. You know,
Sure.
People might call things like Roswell a conspiracy
Or JFK.
theory. Well,
Very
JFK like I think is not different, and I'd be happy to talk about that if you want to.
Sure.
But like I wouldn't call something like Roswell a conspiracy theory. I think that's something else.
Okay.
And we'll have to do an episode about aliens sometime and alien visitation. But I think the Mandela Effect is uniquely poised as a conspiracy theory because it's survived for a long time, like especially in the way that people consume and discard information right now. You know, the Mandela Effect came out at the start of that, and it's survived. You know, it's survived that climate so far, and you know, it's also unique in the fact that it is like an entirely mental phenomenon. You know, there's nothing physically different about the Mandela
That's
Effect.
true.
It's
And
all
in fact, I think that there's an element of arguing that there are physical differences. Most of the examples of the Mandela Effect have to do with textual things, where like just sort of like words changed.
I guess you're right if that's like defined as a physical thing. I was not thinking of it that way, but you're right.
At its core, it's a mental phenomenon. If you look at the most skeptical people who will talk about the Mandela effect as being real in some sense, the founder of the website, the person who coined the term, Fiona Broome, I just saw a quote from her beforehand that was like her saying, basically, my mind is at least as fallible as anyone else's. You know, like there's an element of skepticism, you know, that is there for a lot of people that makes it clear that they're talking about something that is related to problems of memory. But most of the time, what I'm saying is that the people who are going to like posit, you know, physical effects creating this, they're going to be talking about a magical version of like sort of a science fiction quantum mechanics that where there isn't a physical effect that's causing the mental effect, where the mental effect is secondary.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you're right. Like thinking about it that way. What I meant when I said that it is unique because it's like a mental phenomena is like the word Bernstein would be spelled different anyway if the English language had different rules. Like obviously it doesn't, and it is the way it is. But I just mean like I don't think the spelling of Bernstein Bears or like the cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo, like I don't think that's the thing that matters about the Mandela effect. Like I think the crux of the Mandela effect isn't the things that people say are different. It's like the fact that people remember things differently is like the important thing about it. You know, because I think you could pick anything, you know. I mean, I remember like even just looking around my room right now, like I remember like some things being in different places, you know.
Yeah.
I remember things looking differently. But I don't think like the physical, like tangible part of the Mandela effect is the thing that's important in the way that like the magic bullet is the important thing about JFK. Because it could be anything. Like it doesn't matter what the specific example is.
Yeah. One thing that all these things have in common is that there's like usually with the conspiracy theory, there's a mind, a group of minds, or one mind, you know, that exercises some kind of like dominating, usually evil force, or truth obstructing force against like a population that has no recourse. With the Mandela effect, it wasn't there originally, but it became built into it with the CERN thing. There's the idea that the CERN scientists,
because like
the mental effect isn't here in us. It's in the scientist who's splitting reality, and the effect is just
it's in the person
evil.
That's running the simulation. Yeah,
right. The effect
like,
isn't. There's
right.
no motivation, but just this sort of contradiction of just like, I think the contradiction gets jammed into the imagined mind of that one person as just sort of an evil. Which I would argue that whenever there's evil present, there's always a gap, like in explanation.
Yeah, and you're right now that I think about it, because if you had asked me before you said what you just said, I would have said that obviously like the CERN thing happened before the Mandela effect was popularized. But that's not what it is, right?
No, it's not what it is.
Like the CERN thing happened after the Mandela effect had been established.
Yeah, it got built into it.
Yeah, like,
and we'd be remiss not to talk about the fact that there's that one CERN video where people are dancing and they're dancing to Happy.
Yeah.
Because of that trend of people dancing to Happy.
What if Pharrell Williams is behind this?
Yeah, what if Pharrell?
He was so mad with the Neptunes that he
like Shiva, like he's like singing and he's dancing Happy and creating like multiple timelines. The one guy, I think you know who I'm talking about. He has like a 20-minute long video about CERN, and he very smugly tells you everything that's happening, how this is a magical working.
Yeah, the one that you sent me.
Yeah, I know.
The one that you sent me and only watched because I watched it.
Yeah.
That was a bad video. That's like the kind of thing that like makes me want to bully people that believe in the Mandela effect. Like,
no, exactly. And that was a compilation of like multiple. But the part in that about the guy with the beard and the long hair who believes that CERN are like these evil overseers that are controlling reality, he focuses in on the one guy in the office who's wiggling around like this, and he has a sign that says Bond number 1, and then on overlapping that sign, he has a sign that says Mandela, and he has some equation on his shirt that looks kind of like it says laugh from far away. And he makes this whole case that because Bond 1 is played by Barry Nelson in the first Casino Royale movie, I believe. It's actually it's a message saying Barry Nelson Mandela, and he's laughing about it because there's a joke that CERN is pulling on, I guess, the entire universe.
Yeah, which, like, that's okay. So this is something I don't think I put it in the notes, and I feel like we haven't said anything about it so far. I would be remiss if I said I remembered what we've talked about in the last 2 hours or whatever. But, you know, something that on the, like, it's like the same thing as, like, how you have to talk about what would be different if what the quote unquote crazy person believed was true. You know, anytime that humans are the most powerful and, like, potent force in the universe, you kind of, like, it's kind of irresponsible to believe in what people are saying. Like,
Yes.
To think that, like, a bunch of friggin' Europeans are, like, pulling the strings of the universe is so ridiculous to me. Like, I believe more, like, you know, as a person that is, like, definitely an agnostic person, like, I believe more in the Christian God, like, than I do in the might of CERN. Like, as somebody that's not willing to say I believe in God, I believe in God more than that. Right?
Yeah.
It's just such a leap, you know, from the way that everybody has to experience the world. I mean, there are like people that have real power, right? There's the guy that can somehow it has been put in charge of, like, the nuclear launch codes, right? In every country. That is a powerful person. You know, the people that run the Large Hadron Collider are not. There's no way that you're ever going to convince me with this kind of theory that they are the people that have, like, got the world in the palm of their hand. Because if they can change Earth, then they can just change everything, and, like, everything is subject to them. I don't know why people are willing to believe that.
Right. Because what it actually does is it creates always more mysterious and farther away, like, causalities. Like, if there's any causalities, people get to these things usually without any regard for, like, a traditional sort of like looking for any kind of real causal relationships. And I'm not saying that we can't find truth in ways alternative to looking for causalities. I think we could come up with some examples where that's not true. For example, that feeling you described when you listen to a song that feeling you had watching Twin Peaks can't be reduced to, like, all right, well, this is what happened. This is why it happened, by mentally. Same thing with certain drugs. Like, same things with looking for certain coincidences. Sometimes you do look for something, you try to manifest something, but what ends up happening is in some way more, I don't know, I think like intense and meaningful than you could have ever expected.
I do believe that, like, perception is reality, right? You have to, like, you can't help but think that the way that you perceive the world is the way that the world is. Like, there's nothing for it. Like, maybe like some enlightened person, you know, on a mountain somewhere is going to tell me otherwise. But what becomes dangerous is, like, projecting your belief on other experiences. Like, if you don't believe, like, scientists because somebody says that you need to vaccinate your kids, and you believe that they're going to become autistic because of that, even though you're born autistic, and, like, you're not going to get hit over the head and become autistic.
Right.
Like, that's not what every scientist does, right? Every scientist, like, if you're an anti-vaxxer, every scientist is not developing a vaccine. Like, it's not the same people. So, like, right. To say, I mean, people get fired from CERN all the time, right? It's not the same people, but there hasn't been a whistleblower, right? They haven't found like the one good person that ever worked at CERN.
Right.
Yeah,
Usually there's right. Honestly, usually with these phenomena, there is somebody who claims to. How many situations are there where there's a government like agent who retires and then is like, "I'm going to talk about the fact that I saw somebody bend a spoon with their mind."
Yeah, well, or like, how about all the astronauts that say like, yeah, there are aliens? If somebody quit CERN and they told me that like they leaked to me that everything that people say about CERN is true, like they created the black hole or whatever the hell that destroyed the universe. On the one hand, it's like, it does ruin your credibility because, post-career testimony isn't worth much to me. Like, you're not putting anything on the line for it. But it's also like, it's the same circular argument that you're going to find in any conspiracy theory. Like, you can't be the guy that does it and have gotten the job there. And also, you can't not be working there and, like, leaking crazy secrets about it.
Right.
You know?
If you're not working there, if you have no incentive, especially if you get fired from the position,
Especially if you get fired.
or especially if you're selling a book, there's no reason. And that's the thing. That's one of the things that's really, really. I'm never going to hear those Bigfoot noises with the same amazement as I did the other day. Granted, I definitely, there was some cannabis involved. It was like CBD cannabis, but
Yeah.
I definitely was in a slightly altered state and slightly more suggestible when I first watched that video.
Oh my god. Altered States would be like a good name for the show.
I feel like that's taken.
Oh, do you think so? I'll look it up.
Maybe not. It's funny that you say that because I've actually been experiencing something. I think we've gotten to the point where we've talked long enough that I'm starting to. I'll see like little visualizations of things.
Maybe we've talked so much about something that's so weird that instead of releasing like dopamine, our body has started producing dimethyltryptamine.
Or maybe it's like fucking scopolamine from like fucking Nightshades. The Bigfoot dude, okay? You go on his website. He's advertising multiple books, including this shit, The Quantum Bigfoot. So how does quantum physics relate to spiritual reality
Jesus
and Bigfoot?
Christ.
In my 45 plus years of researching this phenomenon, I've heard several very strange reports.
Here's my thing, right? This is why indigenous people talking about Bigfoot is so much more credible to me than the white guy that talks about it. Because like there's like a history of shared knowledge among a family or a community. And I don't think the white man brought Bigfoot to America, right?
No. Bigfoot's old.
Bigfoot's old. There's Bigfoot in like so many cultures. There's the in Australia there's the Yowie, right? Which, by the way, if people have not listened to the Pelega Princess, which I think turned up on like the Australian version of Coast to Coast, look it up. Look up the audio from that. It's this guy named Bongo talking about the Pelega Princess, which is a Yowie, or there is the Migo in Tibetan folklore, which is the Yeti. Right? There's this thing in so many cultures, but it doesn't exist in like any white culture that I'm aware of. There's
Yeah, it doesn't exist in Europe. Yeah, I mean,
there's not like the English Sasquatch.
no.
I mean, there are other mythical creatures.
Giants and whatnot.
Well, yeah, which is funny that like obviously like white culture has its own mythology that exists. The various white cultures. I mean, there's the Greek mythology and there's the the Roman pantheon and all this. But like white American culture doesn't have that. We didn't bring the stories of the giants with us from England. I mean, maybe like more Celtic places like, Nova Scotia. They have their own things. I mean, Stan Rogers wrote a song about, the giants of Scotland.
Yeah.
But the fact is that like, and maybe it's not a fact, maybe this is just my perception, but the fact is that when a Native American person, like, or an indigenous person, an Aboriginal Australian person, peoples from Africa, when they tell a story, I believe it, or I find it more evocative, exponentially more evocative than when a white man is trying to like sell me a book about Bigfoot. I sent you 2 videos actually comparing a white person and an indigenous leader talking about Bigfoot last night with Les Stroud.
Yeah.
At least in my experience, like they're not trying to sell something. They're just like trying to share information in a way that I don't think the guy that's selling the book is trying to do. And, you know, on the one hand, you can say like, well, of course he's going to sell the book. Like that's how you get books out. You know, you can't just produce 1 million copies of a book and pass it out for free and like not be ruined by it.
Right.
But you can make a blog post for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can actually print 1,000 copies of something and it's affordable if you do it right.
Well, yeah, but how far does 1,000 copies go anyway?
But yeah, I was envisioning like tiny pamphlets or zines, like leaflets.
Yeah. But that's not what we get given when we get stuff like this. That's not what you get when you have to research the Mandela Effect. Like you can use free sources online, and like God bless the people that create that like network of information online about the Mandela Effect. Like I'm not even gonna like disparage you for having advertisements on it, because you know you're having more fun in life than I am and probably making more money.
Right. So it's a really well run. It's a very clean website. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Easy to navigate.
Shout outs to the Mandela Effect website. It is just MandelaEffect.com. Like,
yeah.
As with any of this stuff, like you have to like make your own decision about what to believe about it. Thank you for listening to Depth Perception. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, kicking us a little bit of scratch on Patreon.